Enjoy uninterrupted live streaming. Are you ready to elevate your business game?
As long as you're earning something, there's always that opportunity to save.
Stories.
Wewe ni mfanyabiashara, huwezi kaa bure, unajipanga taratibu.
Good morning, karibu sana. Only 2 days left to the end of January 2025. This is the very last Thursday, being January 30th of this year. Karibu sana, this is the Morning Cafe. My name is Fred Ndimuli.
My name is Anne Odida, and of course, as always, we have a lot to tell you about what is happening in the country and of course across our borders. A lot still happening in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Yes, indeed, it is a big story here on our front pages. Ruto's DRC acid test. Yesterday, a planned summit that was to be chaired by President William Ruto on the DRC crisis. We're still not sure if it took off. The president left for Egypt. Meanwhile, Tshisekedi, the president of the DRC, said he would not be attending the summit either way. That's a big story on the front page of the Standard.
Daily Nation, scandal of doctored census data.
Yes, we'll be back to take a look at this. And a very imposing image there of President Felix Tshisekedi of the DRC. The fact that he snapped that meeting with President William Ruto. On the People Daily, Ruto men in blame game on school cash is a big story there.
Taifa Leo wakwaruzana tena.
Nani hawa wanakwaruzana? Tutarejelea kukueleza kinagaubaga. On the Star, Ruto planning to dismiss 15 PSs in major shuffle. The interviews for PSs should be happening sometime next week. Yes. Matters Business.
Small farms face fines, bank freeze over secret owners.
Wow. Watu wamefikiwa baadaye. Munaficha pesa nyinyi. Let's cross over to Uganda, and we have the new vision with us today. Best PLE teachers. This is something that only happens in Uganda. You know, in Kenya, we only recognize the best students. In Uganda, they go a step further, even recognizing the best teachers. Yes? So, Emos Niwadinda, best teacher of English, is from Nyakibare parents, Rukungiri. Natafuta wa mathematics hapa simpati. So Wedi Kintu, second best maths teacher from St. Francis Educational Center, Mukono. Now, this is something that only happens in Uganda. Yeah, strategies they use to make learners excel. Each of these teachers here has been recognized for the exemplary performance of their students in the exams. Other quick highlights on the front page of the New Vision. A tragedy. ISO boss Brigadier Luka is dead. That story is on page 2. And image of the president and the first lady. Na ni kama wameanza kuvaa uniform, same. Kofia white na shati kubwa ya white. Hata inaweza kusemekana a long white dress. And the President Museveni with his usual white shirt. These are just some of the headlines in Uganda. Today we do not have the Daily Monitor. We go straight to Tanzania.
Vigogo Chadema waenda fungati and wajifungia siku 7 kuweka mkakati utekelezaji wa no reform, no election, kuponyana majeraha ya uchaguzi wa ndani. Lissu, Heche wakabidhiwa ofisi wakiwataka wanachama kuvunja makundi. Wale
ambao wajui fungate ni nini, ni kama honeymoon. So after the wedding munaenda mahali munajifungia. So kufungate. Ndio wale pia wamepigwa picha pale. Sio picha, ni karakacha. Wanaenda kwa kikao cha kuvajenga viongozi waliochaguliwa hivi juzi wa chama cha upinzani kule Tanzania, Chadema. Vidokezo zaidi kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa hili gazeti. Mapigano ya pamba moto DRC. Hii ni habari ambayo imepewa kipaumbele kwa magazeti mengi hata yale hapa Kenya. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa 6 hapa.
shilingi trilioni 5 ya Uganda kupeleka SGR
ya
Tanzania kupeleka SGR hadi Burundi. Na Dar es Salaam, serikali Tanzania na Burundi zinaingia katika makubaliano ya kufanya nini? Kuanza ujenzi wa reli ya kisasa kutoka Uvinzi ama hadi Masungati nchini Burundi. It's much as tourism there.
Oh yes. So SGR, they want to extend it the same way we want to extend our SGR to Malaba so that you can connect with the Ugandan SGR. Now Tanzania is thinking of extending the SGR to Burundi and eventually I'm sure to Rwanda and probably to DRC. It's very interesting. Vifungu vya uraia pacha vyainguliwa bungeni. Hiyo tutarejelea kuangalia baadaye sababu hiyo lugha tuelewi sana. Let's take a look at what's happening in Rwanda. This is the New Times. UN commends Rwanda for heeding last-minute call to relocate Goma-based staff. A lot of those people who are escaping the fighting in Goma crossing over into Uganda. No, into Rwanda rather, because Goma is actually right at the border with Rwanda. So Rwanda has been offering quite some relief to most people who've been arrested, even to families that are escaping the fighting in Goma. Businesses reopen as normalcy returns in Rubavu. Now Rubavu is a town across the border in Rwanda, which was also affected by the fighting on the other side of the border. So these are view of one of the streets in Rubavu town following the reopening of businesses after gunfire and bombshells were fired from Goma. Yes, on Monday. These are two towns, Goma on one side of the border, Rubavu on the Rwandese side of the border, and it was affected by the fighting in Rwanda. We still do not know if Paul Kagame had said yes to the summit, which was to be chaired by President William Ruto. But meanwhile, they're saying that more than 2,000 UN staff have fled to Rwanda since Monday. So the crisis in the DRC persists. So these are the regional headlines, matters to do with the crisis in the DRC. We'll be back to take a look at the local dailies later on. For now, let's take a look at the weather situation and we start off. This is Nairobi, right?
Yes, Nairobi. 17 degrees. It will rain today.
Yes.
Cloud cover throughout, a lot of showers, so beba umbrella.
Yes. They're saying rain is likely around 1 p.m. because it's 70%, 80% chance throughout the afternoon. Thunderstorms at around 3 p.m. So definitely it's raining today in Nairobi. Sunshine, kidogo sana. Kidogo sana. That's as far as Nairobi is concerned. Take a look at Nyahururu. It's usually very chilly. 12 degrees Celsius as we speak. Also, expecting rain, likely rain today at around 1 p.m. Highs of 19 degrees. That's the highest they're going to get today. So in as far as rain is concerned, the 11.2 millimeters of rainfall, definitely it will be raining in Nyahururu today. Tuvuke tuende upande ule mwingine wa nchi.
Feels like 24 degrees. It's 21 degrees as at now. Highs of 28.
Where?
In Homa Bay.
Okay. Yes.
In Homa Bay. You'll be experiencing a little bit of sunshine. Kutoka saa 5 hapo. Precipitation kidogo, 50%.
All right. Yes, 3 millimeters of precipitation, not much rainfall there. At the coast, let's take a look at Ukunda. 25 degrees Celsius as we speak, feels like 27, sunny day. Yes, highs of 30 degrees. And as far as precipitation is concerned, nothing much from that end. It's comfortable holiday weather in Ukunda. Let's take a look at Marsabit.
22 degrees, feels like 24, highs of 28. It will be sunny for the better part of the day with a little bit of precipitation, but that is not much.
All right, so that is as far as Marsabit is concerned. If you are in Nairobi, definitely expect some rainfall. Let's take a look at the traffic situation in the city. Tuone kama this weather situation is affecting you in any way. And we can already see from the overall map of Nairobi, the usual trouble spots are building up slowly. Jaribu kutumia technology tuone kama itatusaidia, but these are the areas we're looking at. Yes. So pale, mbona inakata maneno yangu hii? Pangani interchange is building up slowly. Areas around Jogoo Road, Buruburu hapo kwa junction iko kidogo, Makadara area, expect City Stadium roundabout, it's building up as well as this area around Haile Selassie Avenue, and Machakos bus station. So if you're using Jogoo Road, expect some traffic. You can see where the trouble spots are. Up around Nyayo Stadium, naona there are a bit of spots there which are yellow. I do not know why, but there's always something happening there, meaning that traffic is building up there as well. Other areas that I can see traffic, nothing much. Probably Kangundu Road, it's getting slow. I can see bits of yellow stretches there. So that's the traffic situation around Wilson Airport. Heading away from town, also a bit of traffic there. But it's very early in the morning. It's only about 9 or 10 minutes past 6. So this could develop into something else later. We'll be back to take a look at this at around 1:30.
Let's take a look at the quote of the day.
Spread love everywhere you go. Let no one ever come without leaving happier.
All right, we start off with the Standard, and the big story there has to do with the crisis in the DRC. It's a Ruto's DRC acid test, and we have pictures there of the three presidents, President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, President William Ruto of Kenya, and President Felix Tshisekedi of DRC. And on one hand, Paul Kagame says he had a conversation with Secretary Rubio, there's a US State Secretary, on the need to ensure a ceasefire in eastern DRC and address the root causes of the conflict once and for all. Meanwhile, President William Ruto says they've agreed to have a meeting on Wednesday. Whether or not this meeting happened, we do not know. It was to be a virtual meeting. We understand President William Ruto is currently in Egypt, but that meeting would have taken place even with him in Egypt either way. But President Felix Tshisekedi of Rwanda, of DRC, says the president of DRC, Felix Tshisekedi, will not participate in the virtual summit of heads of state. This is an official announcement by the presidential spokesperson in Kinshasa. So whether or not this meeting happened yesterday, we still do not know. We do not have the details. They're calling it a tightrope. The crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo is simmering, with doomsayers predicting war in the region that will pose a stern leadership test. President William Ruto yesterday was to chair a meeting of key players that was met with murmurs over his approach. The next few days will be critical to restoring peace in the mineral-rich country and the region. Now, this story has been given a lot of prominence on the Standard today. Pages 4, 5, 6, and 7 dedicated to the crisis in the DRC. And you have a picture there of a street in Goma. There's a lot of fire burning and people trying to carry their items and moving to safety. That's the situation currently in Goma. Other quick highlights on the front page of the Standard. Pale chini, Uhuru says Trump aid policy a wake-up call. Former President Uhuru Kenyatta has chided African countries for crying foul over withheld funding, saying had they prioritized their budgets, they would not be shocked when the US refuses to fund some of Africa's basic needs, such as healthcare, noting it's America's right to say no. Yes, indeed, it is their right to say no.
Yeah.
D-Day for Pendo in D-Day for police rather in Baby Pendo case. That story is on page 10. And governors reject new revenue formula. KRA meanwhile needs 8 billion shillings daily to hit revenue target by July. That's a story on the back page of this paper. No, rather on page 18, business pages. When you flip the Standard, it is Matter Sports. So why punting Manchester United need much needed rest? Manchester United and Tottenham are among the sides aiming to ensure direct passage to the Europa League, last 16 in tonight's league phase finale, with 9 places in the knockout stages up for grabs. So today we're focusing on the Europa League. Timu kubwa kama Arsenal wenye walikuwa kwa Champions League walikuwa jana, na Arsenal walichapa timu fulani hapo mabao 2-1. So hizi zingine za Europa League hiyo ni leo. Arteta happy as Arsenal win a red card appeal. Now, Arsenal have successfully appealed against the red card shown to Miles Lewis-Kelly in Saturday's 1-0 win at Wolves, meaning the 18-year-old escapes a 3-match ban. So for Arsenal fans, Lewis-Kelly will be available for the match against Manchester City. How about that? Interesting.
Tutakuwa hapo.
Tutakuwa hapa. That's the Standard today.
Daily Nation scandal of doctored census data. And for the past 5 years, Kenya has been making financial and policy decisions for 3 counties, that is Garissa, Mandera and Wajir, based on false data. The High Court has now cancelled the 2019 Kenyan National Bureau of Statistics census results for the 3 northeastern counties, citing significant irregularities, and ordered a recount within a year, well ahead of the 2027 polls. You know, and you're wondering, why now? I saw that on social media.
Yes.
Why now?
That's a debate, because if we're talking and looking at numbers, regional numbers ahead of 2027 polls, then we should be basing them on the 2019 census.
Yes.
But now it would appear that the numbers for these 3 counties could change.
Yeah.
And does it mean that they could have a significant stake or higher numbers come 2027? And could someone be getting ready to cash in on those numbers?
Yeah.
Yes.
We will be there once again.
Tutakuwa hapa.
All right, Tshisekedi snubs Ruto meeting for SADC forum. There's a photo there of the President Felix Tshisekedi of DRC. And the Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi snubbed a meeting convened by President William Ruto to discuss the security crisis in his country, but confirmed attendance of a separate meeting convened by Southern African countries, putting into doubt his commitment to the East African Community bloc. Now, you see, Congo has accused our President William Ruto, of being a biased mediator. So I don't know if that is what is happening with Tshisekedi's decision to go to SADC instead of the one convened by our president. We'll see. And on the top strip, hustlers to hustlers, troubling evolution of Kenya's beach boys. They are a security threat. That story is on page 19. And down here, there's a photo of KINDIKI, COGs, and as well as this is the NEC CEO. And KINDIKI says, Deputy President Kithure Kindiki has told of his predecessor Rigathi Gachagua over comments that he will ensure President Ruto becomes a one-term president, even as he warned his detractors in Mount Kenya to brace for a fight. Aliliza Gachagua, is that all you're proud of, to remove the president out of office to ensure that he's a one-term president? You can do better. Maneno yake.
Well, kila mtu ako na Kenya anataka. Ameongea mtoke.
Yes. All right. And Council of Governors Finance and Economic Planning Committee Chairman Fernandez Barasa says the proposal by the Commission on Revenue Allocation would adversely affect 21 counties, which would lose up to 12 billion Kenyan shillings. And Matters Education petition has been filed against NEC, and it argues that the decision to administer the exams violates, that is the July exams, that gives KCSE students a chance to do a retake of the paper that they failed. And they say it violates students' rights and was reached without proper public participation. Kule juu tena, Trump's aid freeze, a wake-up call for African nations. Uhuru advises. Uhuru alisema mnalia nini? He's not your president, you're not paying taxes for America.
But in ukweli, African countries that claim to have been independent, some for over 60 years, bado mnangojea tu mbehu America. Move on, please. You can do better.
Absolutely. And that's the Standard.
All right.
The Daily Nation.
The Daily Nation.
Yeah.
The People Daily goes with something totally different. Matters Education. Ruto men in blame game on school cash. They talk about the delayed capitation to schools, and who's to blame for that delay.
Acha nikusaidia hapo kidogo tu. And you see, Mbadi says that they had disbursed all the monies for primary and JSS 2 weeks ago, and cannot therefore understand why the schools were still complaining. So Mbadi is telling schools to ask the Education CS Migos. And according to Mbadi, Treasury had released 4.6 billion Kenyan shillings for primary schools, 19.6 billion Kenyan shillings for JSS, and another 14 billion for secondary schools. And this, he says, left the government with a balance of 14 billion Kenyan shillings that is intended to be disbursed in the next few days.
Okay. Yes. So is it the 14 billion shillings they're complaining about, or is it the fact that hata ile treasury wanasema waliachilia haijaonekana bado?
Amesema ulizeni CS Education.
So blame game. So treasury versus the education ministry. All right. Wetangula warning on boundaries And this is a very interesting story. And, you know, the delimitation of boundaries cannot happen within 12 months to the elections. The last time you can hold delimitation of boundaries is 12 months to the elections. We already passed the deadline prescribed by the Constitution. And now the Speaker is saying that that process could actually be the biggest casualty of the delayed IEBC. So probably we're going to the next election without a review of the boundaries. What does that mean? That's a big story and a big discussion point. We have the picture there of the retired President Uhuru Kenyatta. He attended a health summit in Mombasa yesterday, and you can see him there seated alongside the CS for Health. I forget her name.
Deborah Barasa.
Deborah Barasa, thank you for that. And why this is a story saying why Uhuru wants Kenyans to carry their destiny. Yes, everyone is complaining that Donald Trump has cut funding to African countries, withdrawing from WHO, which would affect us. We don't have vaccines. Uhuru anauliza, na kweli mbona mnangojea msaidiwe na America? You can actually do better, which I believe. Yes, he owes you nothing. He's not your president.
Yeah.
On the very top strip, Nairobi DRC crisis talks in limbo as Tshisekedi keeps off. We've already discussed that story. Alisema, mnaweza fanya mkutano yenu, mimi sikuji.
Wakwaruzana tena, that's his top story on Taifa Leo. And Naibu Rais Profesa Kithure Kindiki amemsuta mtangulizi wake Rigathi Gachagua kuwa kauli yake kwamba Rais William Ruto atakuwa rais wa muhula mmoja ni ndoto na halitakuwa jambo rahisi kutimiza. And that is what we said. Aliuliza Gachagua, is that the only thing that you're proud of? That the only thing that you want to do? Yeah.
Lakini mbona wanashinda wakizungumzia Gachagua? Because you said, it doesn't matter, yule jamaa tulimtoa, is a nobody, very inconsequential. But everything he says, they have to answer. Everything he says, they have to answer. Yes.
And pale juu Gachagua ahidi kuhakikisha rais anahudumu muhula mmoja tu. Kindiki asema hiyo ni ndoto ya mchana. Alright. Kule chini, Tshisekedi asusia kikao cha Ruto. We've talked about it. Rais wa DRC alikataa kushiriki mazungumzo yaliyoitishwa na Rais Ruto kuhusu Goma. Hapo kando ni hapa ni Fuliza tu afichua Mwangaza, na kaunti ya Meru inaendeshwa kwa madeni tupu, Gavana Mwangaza afichua. Na Amerika yapendekeza hatua DRC, inalitaka Umoja wa Mataifa kuchukua hatua ili kusitisha uvamizi wa jeshi la Rwanda, that is M23. Kule juu, uzembe wa bunge la 13 waanikwa. Wabunge walipitisha idadi ndogo zaidi ya miswada 49 iliyowasilishwa. Habari hiyo iko katika ukurasa wa 5.
And that's a very interesting story. The 13th parliament has been highly criticized.
Yes.
They're always very busy. It's the one parliament that impeached a deputy president, the one parliament that passed the finance bill 2024 that brought about quite some problems. But it would appear it is the laziest coming together of legislators. The third session of the National Assembly only managed to enact less than half of 49 bills that were introduced in the House, highlighting the underperformance of the 13th Parliament. And allow me to tell them, shame on you. Ruto planning to dismiss 15 PSs in major shuffle. Hiring process overshadowed by talk of applicants aged above 60. Yes, the interviews for potential PSs coming up, I think, next week. But the problem is, some of the applicants, some of those shortlisted are already above the age of 60, yet the retirement age, mandatory retirement age is 60. So what does that mean? President had directed retirees' terms should not be extended. So how come people over 60 are being shortlisted for interviews? Meanwhile, those already there could actually lose their jobs. Up to 15 principal secretaries once this interviews are conducted and nominees picked. The Star has a picture there of streets in Nairobi, flooded streets in Nairobi. Sorry state of Nairobi's sewer drainage system. We've been experiencing rainfall for the last 2-3 days, and 5 minutes into the rains, the road is flooded everywhere. Yes, and we have puddles. Alafu niliona watu wa BMW wanajaribu kupita kwa maji. Ai, you're testing fate. Walijaribu, jamaa na BMW anapita kwa maji, ikazima tu hapo immediately. Kuna gari zingine hata zikinyeshewa na maji huwa zinazima.
Uncle Sax should do something. how they call him.
Sarah remanded DPP to oppose release on bail. That's a star. I think I'm also having difficulty reading from them. Slain Dutchman Top Cohen's Kenyan widow Sarah Wairimo will spend the next 5 days in Langata Women's Prison after denying a murder charge in the unresolved 2019 killing. Wairimo appeared before Kibera Judge Diana Kavedza on Wednesday with a state indicating it would oppose her release on bail. This story is on page 3. It is a case that has been continuing for the last almost 7-8 years. Interesting. Kindiki hitting back at GACHAGUA over Ruto term remark is also there on the front page, and Baby Pendo case fails to take off for the 5th time. The plea taking for 19 police bosses in the Baby Pendo murder case failed to take place for the 5th time yesterday, after the prosecution said it was not ready to proceed. State prosecutor instead asked to be given 45 days to review the charges before re-plea taking can take place. Yes, that's another story there on the Star.
And Business Daily, small firms face fines, bank freeze over secret owners. The small businesses will face fines and loss of banking services if they fail to disclose their financial accounts and secret shareholders to banks in line with the new anti-money laundering rules that became effective in November. Now, banks have started asking micro, small and medium enterprises, that is MSMEs, to provide personal details of their beneficial owners such as names, physical addresses, PINs, source of income, current occupation and water or electricity bills.
Wamefikiwa. Saying close to 7.4 million MSMEs set to be affected in anti-money laundering clampdown. Watu wanajificha tu huko nyuma, kumbe wanatumia hizi kampuni ndogo ndogo kwa masuala yao.
Siku za mwizi. And we see lending rates decline 5 months after CBK rate cut. Now, commercial banks have made the first cut on lending rates since the central bank started slashing the benchmark rate in August last year, yielding to pressure from the banking regulator. CBK data shows that average lending rates fell to 16.89% in December from an 8-year high of 17.22% recorded in November.
All right, interesting news and positive news for Kenyan borrowers.
Global economists forecast rebound in Kenya's growth. Now, a group of global economists sees Kenya's economy expanding more than 5% in 2025 on falling cost of borrowing and easing government budget shortfalls. That could be good news. Kenya Power, Kenya Railways lead in hiring casual workers. Eco jobs KE, they say. Okay. CMA stopped from punishing Imperial Bank ex-directors, and share of foreigners trading at NSE down to 35% in December.
Wow.
That's the Business Daily.
The matters business, and now let's take a look at the cartoons today tuone wameangazia mambo gani. Tunaanza na the cartoon on the People Daily. We have jamaa tu ana sura tinginya. Ameshika rungu pale na panga na iko na damu. Anaitwa Goons for Hire. Amekanyaga ile ballot box ya 2027 elections. The commentator is saying the danger no one is talking about. Yes. That siku hizi wanasiasa, they very easily opt for goons to counter their opponents. And the commentator says that this is actually the problem we're looking at. We may be thinking it's about who's the candidate for president, Gen Z watafanya nini. Goons for hire.
Huyu ni Mungike.
Goons
for hire.
Goons for hire.
All right, this is the Star. And we see a photo of just the new ICT CS. Amewekwa hapo kama
let's say it's a caricature.
A caricature. Okay, a caricature.
Of the new CS ICT.
Yeah. Anasema woof woof, and in this phone ni kama ana face lions.
You see what has been happening is that this new ICTCS has been giving a lot of threats on what could possibly happen to social media. That, you know, we can actually, tutaki, lakini we can actually shut down the internet. We can even close Facebook, you know. We are able to do this, he keeps on saying. So he's been depicted here as let's say a lapdog of this. You can see there's a leash. And then they've used this, what do you call it? Is it a trinket or what? That he wore the other day. And was highly criticized on social media. Alivaa kwanza rangi za Uganda. Hapa kwa And then you're kipara bana, I tell you. But you can actually see that he's not speaking for himself. There's someone standing right there. You can see the big shoes. And there's a leash holding this lapdog. Alafu anasema woof woof. Sio sisi tumesema by the way. Hii cartoon ya Star. Daily Nation. Matters DRC.
Tshisekedi ametubebea keki hapo. I don't know who is eating this cake.
There's so many
Rwanda.
folks.
Or is it Rwanda?
There's so many folks that want to a piece of the DRC pie.
Yeah.
Alafu anasema kuna mlango pale imeandikwa under new plunder. It was under new management, but now under new plunder. There are different interests represented by these folks here.
Yeah.
Everyone wants a piece of DRC. Na hata yeye pia ameuma upande moja. And finally on the Standard, amekuja sana. We have a caricature of the president holding a mirror.
Mr. President, be an honest man. Look for a mirror before you talk about corruption and look at yourself. That was Rigi G. Na kweli amechorwa hapa. Amebeba mirror hapo anajiangalia.
Anajiangalia kwa kioo. Makaratasi hapo imeandikwa Nyanza Western, zile hesabu anafanya. Commentator hapa anasema mirrors don't lie. It's true, mirrors don't lie. Lakini sio sisi tumesema hii ni Rigi G has been quoted here na hii cartoon ni ya Standard. We don't have any cartoon here at TV47. Pana kasirikia sisi. Lakini amesema mirrors don't do what? They don't lie. So those are some of the discussions happening across not just Kenya, but the region as well. DRC crisis, big news. Away from this, these are the other discussions we're going to be having. Today is Thursday, Fitness Thursday from 9 to 10.
Get ready. That's all I would say.
Kim Keep Fit atakuwa anawasaidia kuunga misuli.
And we'll be talking about urinary tract infection with Ignatius Kibe, a gynecologist. So stay tuned for that.
That's from 8 a.m. Before that, State of the Nation will be having these 4 panelists in studio. Kathy Rungu, a political leader, Wilson Sosion, former SGKNUT, and also a former member of the National Assembly, Robert Alai, MCA Kileleshwa Ward here in Nairobi, and Ishmael Nyaribo, an advocate of the High Court. These are panelists on State of the Nation right after the break.
On social media platforms, interact with us at TV47 Kenya on Facebook and YouTube, on X at TV47 News KE. My handle is at Ann_Dida. As always, the hashtag is Morning Cafe.
My X handle is at Fred in the Morning.
Stay with us.
Are you ready to elevate your business game?
As long as you're earning something, there's always that opportunity to save. And you start with where you are.
Kama wewe ni mfanyabiashara, huwezi kaa bure, unajipanga taratibu vile inavyofaa.
Join us each week as we dive into the stories of the world's most driven entrepreneurs.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
The Grind, where business meets brilliance. Tune in every Monday at 7:30 p.m. because your business deserves the best.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism, how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m.
Jiunge nasi tunapoangazia safari za viongozi bora. Kutoka kwa ushindi mkubwa hadi masomo magumu.
Wakati wetu kwamba wasichana si wa kusoma, ni wa kuolewa, ng'ombe ipatikane, wazazi wakuwe watajiri.
Tunashughulikia yote.
I wish I were a better investor.
My parents taught me how to look for things for myself.
Tazama Mfahamu Kiongozi, ambapo kila kipindi kimejaa maarifa, mikakati na hadithi za kukuza azma yako.
For me to succeed, I have to fight.
Kila Alhamisi saa 1:30.
Are you ready to elevate your business game?
As long as you're earning something, there's always that opportunity to save. And you start with where you are.
Kama wewe ni mfanyabiashara, huwezi kaa bure, unajipanga taratibu vile inavyofaa.
Join us each week as we dive into the stories of the world's most driven entrepreneurs.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
The Grind, where business meets brilliance. Tune in every Monday at 7:30 p.m. because your business deserves the best.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated. Raising the child on your own.
All right, good morning, welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47. A time for us to take a look at the state of the nation. My name is Fred Ndimuli. The big headlines today, and we have the nation right behind me. Scandal of doctored census data. We'll be looking at that story later. Tshisekedi snubs Ruto meeting for SADC Forum. On the Standard, Ruto's DRC acid test. This is one story that cuts across all the major dailies across the region. And it's big news in Kenya as well, with President William Ruto, who chairs the EAC. He was intended to host a summit on the DRC crisis, which was snubbed by the president of the DRC Felix Tshisekedi. Allow me to introduce my panelists this morning, beginning on my immediate left, Kathy Rungu, political commentator. Karibu sana, Kathy. Robert Alai, MC Kilelesho, makes a comeback to TV47. Karibu sana. Wakili Ishmael Aribo also joins us. Karibu sana, Wakili. And Wilson Sosion, a former SGKNUT, who has also served as member of the National Assembly, is also with us this morning. Karibu sana.
Good morning.
Let's start off with this regional crisis. What's happening in the DRC? It is an ongoing crisis. It threatens to blow up into a full humanitarian crisis. Kenya somehow has been involved in this, of course, with William Ruto chairing the EAC and in a position to mediate on these talks. We have been involved to a huge extent in trying to mediate these efforts for peace in DRC for a while now. President Uhuru Kenyatta was part of that. President Ruto has done his part. But it would appear that to a certain extent, Kenya is not seen as an unbiased arbiter in this. Hence, the snubbing by President Felix Tshisekedi and the attack on the Kenyan embassy in Kinshasa. That alone says a lot about Kenya's involvement. When it comes to our diplomacy and our foreign policy, this administration has been criticized for being very goofy. Do you think this is one of those instances where we have also goofed up an opportunity to mediate? Kathy.
Good morning. I believe this is another of those very, tragic moves or comments that we have made as a nation, and it affects the country when it comes to the diplomatic ties that we have enjoyed for a very long time with other countries, be it in Africa or even beyond the African borders. But then I think, just like Trump said the other day, we need to start sorting out our mess. Because when you look at this crisis seriously, you realize that the wars in DRC and most of these other countries, including Southern Sudan, all the wars are around the natural resources in those countries. So the sooner we put our house in order, the better. And I want to believe that the incoming AU chairperson would need to concentrate on some of these issues more, because the stability of individual states will affect the stability of the entire African Union, and that is important. Having said that, I hope and really wish our sisters and brothers in DRC, we really hope that they will be able to reach to some amicable solution, because peace is really important. And as we have always said, when there is such a crisis, when there is violence, the people who suffer most is actually women and children. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Alai, you've had an opportunity to work in the DRC for some time, and Kenya has always been that safe haven, not just for the DRC, for people in DRC, for Ugandans, Tanzanians, Rwandans, and Burundians. Seeing the Kenyan embassy in Kinshasa being attacked, do you understand that kind of feeling or sentiment that probably Kenya is not really liked that much?
Yeah, I thank you so much for having me. It's very sad, DRC was the second employment I had in my life. When I worked with the UN mission there, it was then called MONUC, and now it's called MINURSO. And I think it's very unfortunate what is going on in Congo, because some people in that country have been born in war. And listening even today, this morning, to the BBC, you hear people saying that, why do we have to, I am 47 years old. I was born and literally I got into war as a child soldier, and my children have never seen anything like peace. The children of ministers and presidents are not in the army and so on. It's very unfortunate what is happening in Congo. The North Kivu situation, where M23, which is thought to be aligned to the Rwanda, and Rwanda thinks that there is a group which is trying to persecute the Congolese Tutsis. So I think the war in Congo is a continuation of what happened in Rwanda, and if it's not contained well, it might, spill over to Burundi, because you saw the president of DRC didn't attend that meeting of yesterday with the president, which was chaired by the president, and also the president of Burundi didn't attend. and you can see that the three countries, Rwanda, Burundi, and DRC, might be joined in another war, which might spill over to become a serious ethnic cleansing. I think it's very unfortunate, but I think that we need to go back. Kenya needs to be a neutral arbiter. When I worked there, Kenya didn't have active troops, but we had military observers who are very loved by the locals there, and the situation there was one of the worst. I think then we had almost 56,000 UN troops in that country, and Kenya was very loud, but I don't think that is the same situation now. If you see the embassy, which is, Kinshasa is almost 1,500 kilometers away from Goma. You see the embassy being...
Do you understand that kind of sentiment, that Kenya is no longer seen as a neutral arbiter in such matters? A role that we've played for quite a long time, and we've done so well with it.
I think, I think it started from when we handled the transition from President Kabila to now Tshisekedi, and you realize that it's only the Kenyan leaders who attended that inauguration ceremony in Kinshasa. From all of Africa. Most of the SADC countries avoided the inauguration, and even East Africa. But Kenya, played actively, and we even saw some governors travel to the same inauguration. I think that the previous regime might have gotten so involved in it, and even the current one, even commenting, I think even bringing in the issue of the French president in, has made it look like we are not neutral, or we are playing to the, for the interest of the foreign regimes in this conflict. So I think Kenya needs to go back, play the role of the neutral arbiter in some of these conflicts. We have been a home to very many foreigners who are fleeing war. It is sometimes we complain like a leader in Nairobi. We're seeing a lot of hawkers now from the Congo, DRC and Burundi, selling coffee and tea around the development sites in Nairobi. But the country needs to be very neutral in some of these conflicts, Somali, Sudan, and DRC now.
President Tshisekedi is definitely not comfortable with President William Ruto in as far as acting as mediator in this. There's that comment about, and Bonalai has mentioned about talking to Emmanuel Macron, the French president. And do you think that probably President William Ruto has made some rather obvious goofs which have placed him in an awkward position as a mediator?
Well, I cannot call them goofs, but if you look at the Sudan also, when Kenya tried to mediate, Sudan refused and declined to allow, Kenya to be a mediator. So there must be something happening that obviously is wrong relationship-wise, because if you have a good relationship with another party, they are likely to entertain you into their dispute. But if the relationship is not that cozy, I think that they will be cautious. And like my co-panelists have said, you see, we have always been seen as the center where, peace can be integrated. We have had very good diplomacy relationship with the East African region and I think all Africa. But you see, William Ruto was invited to the United States, and our country was recognized highly. Probably how was that glamour handled vis-a-vis other African countries? So again, we come back to how we handle our own affairs. Is it correct? Is it up to standard? I do not. I can see the newspaper is saying maybe even the kind of remarks that earlier on the Kenyan president gave about the Congolese not being able to rear cows and all that. So it's really, in my view, about relationships. It is not something I think that has been done, intentionally, or a commission of some activity like how they are accusing the Rwandan rebels, the M23. So it is how we are managing the wealth we have in terms of people relationships and in terms of intergovernment relationship between Kenya and these other countries. And it's a big area to improve. May not have to blame or say that's a goof, but it's a big area to improve. Because if, as a Kenyan president, you go to this country, they say no, and again you go here, they say no. You've got to look, is it the people of Kenya that are not treating us well, or is it the head of state? You see, look at the former head of state. He has been given, again, responsibility to go all over Africa, Is he being rejected? So these are some of the things we need to look at, and then, of course, try to improve particularly on the relationships.
Now, talking about relationships, it comes at a time when Kenya is really keen on some relationships, especially Africa. It's only 15 or 16 days to the AUC chairman's election. These relationships are very key right now for President William Ruto. Having him in a place where other presidents are saying no to a meeting that he has called definitely would also affect something like the AUC election.
I think we are trying to magnify some reservations of one or two people or presidents. President William Ruto is the chair, EAC, elected by the rest of the presidents. And DR Congo is a member state of EAC. And it is within the mandate of the chair of EAC to convene emergency meetings of presidents when it is necessary, because the conflict at DR Congo does not only affect DR Congo, it affects the entire EAC. And the guns must be silenced so that there's peace, there's order, and there is democratic order in all our countries. That needs to be brought on board. It is not a walk in the park to unite Africa. And we are talking about Africa Vision 2063, and by 2063 we shall have opened our borders and we shall have intra-African trade, and we must connect Africa through the necessary infrastructure, that is roads, railways, and all other aspects of communication, open up the airspace. Those are very deliberate things, but you know, the quagmire and the complex of Africa, of external interest, is so deep that sometimes you can't move. And any strong leader within the continent of Africa who emerges will always be undermined. Look at what happened to Gaddafi, for example, because he was moving a movement of the United States of Africa. So we would expect a strong president within the continent of Africa to be directly undermined externally. And President William Ruto has not, is not hiding his desire to have a reformed Africa, and in fact is the chair of the Reform Caucus for the reforms of Africa. And Kenya presenting Raila Odinga as chair AU is a strategic step to fast track the reforms within the continent. That will include silencing guns, not only in DR Congo, but everywhere. And it will require the shift of mind and thinking of the African leadership and the people of Africa, so that we can integrate as brothers. You know, an intra-African trade movement that will be robust will not require external support. We will be able to expand our market.
I'm looking at a story on page 4 of the People Daily, and it talks about the same situation, and it adds a bit more of this story. Say last year, Tshisekedi criticized Ruto for taking control of the Nairobi peace process, which was initially led by former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta. Definitely, Tshisekedi has some complaints about how President William Ruto has handled this issue so far. Kathy, do you agree that probably this crisis comes at a very uncomfortable time for Kenya? 16 days to the AUC election.
Most definitely. I mean, when, you know, those kind of disagreements, let me just call them disagreements, political disagreements occur. And at a time like this, when we are just looking forward to the AU election, you're sure that those countries that sympathize with the president, with Felix and his country, are likely to take sides, and in this case will be the losers. So I think it's a dicey situation, and we really hope that between now and then, at least the two leaders from Kenya and from DR Congo will be able to speak to each other, because it is important. And it is actually in the best interest, not just of our country, not just of Raila Odinga, but also the entire EAC and AU.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On the Standard, they call it Ruto's DRC acid tests. Definitely for the president, it's not a walk in the park. How he manages this one, Alai, will say a lot about his diplomacy acumen. But for the AUC, when you talk about the AUC, this is definitely coming at a very awkward time.
It's very awkward, but you know, there's no school for the presidency. There's no school where we go and train presidents before we assign them the duties. So some of them, you know, it's very unfortunate for President Ruto that he has been learning on the job, and it's a crisis after crisis after crisis. That is what is going to determine how strong he is as a leader. And I think that so far he's tried his best and he's performed so well. And I think that even seeing the kind of campaign he has put around Kenya, because this is the second campaign for a Kenyan candidate to be the AUC chair, and I think it's very admirable. I think it's very. I think I'm just wowed by what he has put, the effort he has put as a president personally. You know, the involvement of time, the resources, and so on. And I all wish that, you know, we love the candidate succeed, because he's the Kenyan, the one and only Kenyan candidate. But the war in Congo is a serious test. The thing which it's sad for me, for someone, because I know a good number of Kenyans who are still serving in the DRC as civilian staff. I think it is very unfortunate what has happened, because the country is so rich, it's so vast, so rich, and Kenya benefits. You know, a good number of the carpenters in Nairobi still depend on the timber from Congo. You know, it is, and Kenyan exporters, you see some of the big trucks going to DRC, doing brisk business. It's going to affect even Kenya economically if we don't check it well, the war, because it's the same region which is producing most of the things which we are consuming.
Wakili Nyaribo, of course, we've been talking about President William Ruto's credentials as a diplomat. And some of us call it goofs, some say it's not goofy, but if at all the AUC elections don't go the way President William Ruto hopes they would go, that will also be seen as a failure on his part in terms of diplomacy. He has done a lot of work, he's currently in Egypt, still working on the same.
Yeah, so, you know, I just don't want to go back to relationships again, but I think the people at Foreign Affairs Ministry, the technocrats, will have to do quite a bit in terms of advising the president appropriately, because you remember we had simmering issues, for example, sometimes back, small issues with Uganda when it came to Migingo, Highland and those kind of things, you know, bringing in a lot of milk, whatever, eggs, but they were managed. So why is it different in the Congo? I think also we need to look at the big brother, you know, effect, where maybe these other, you know, foreign nations are interfering in Rwanda, and I don't know, I mean, in the DRC, sorry, and I don't know what that's what Sossion means when he says, you know, there will always be sabotage. You know, if a president comes out and is strong and he wants to do something, and then they are sabotaging him. But we handled Uganda issue quite okay. I mean, there was no protest or those kind of things. Even when that remark, you remember, was made that, hey, how do these guys keep cows and all that, there was protest, but we again managed it very well. So what is different today is what I think Minister of Foreign Affairs technocrats must really put together, so that the president is not seen to be, you know, failed by improper advice. But my colleague here says, you know, the kind of good diplomacy has done all over, you know. I think this is particularly because of the AUC for now. William Ruto has been going around Africa, at least to, you know, promote Raila Odinga as a candidature. Apart from earlier on when he started and he was rated a very good speaker and all that, but you know, again, speaking is actually different really, you know, from implementing the inspirations and the talk you have given to people. So I still think that the foreign affairs guys will have to do a bit of homework to understand where the problem is exactly, so that it can be tackled.
Right. Standard lays the problem squarely on the feet of President William Ruto. They call it Ruto's DRC acid test. On the front page of the Daily Nation, a very imposing picture there of President Felix Tshisekedi of DRC, under the headline, Tshisekedi snubs Ruto meeting for SADC Forum. This is definitely a big discussion. Time for us to take a break. We'll be back, Bwana Sosion. I know you would want to add something there, but let's take a break. You're watching Morning Cafe. We'll be back to continue with this conversation.
Are you ready to elevate your business game?
As long as you're earning something, there's always that opportunity to save. And you start with where you are.
Kama wewe ni mfanyabiashara, huwezi kaa bure, unajipanga taratibu vile inavyofaa.
Join us each week as we dive into the stories of the world's most driven entrepreneurs.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
The Grind, where business meets brilliance. Tune in every Monday at 7:30 p.m. because your business deserves the best.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m.
Jiunge nasi tunapoangazia safari za viongozi bora. Kutoka kwa ushindi mkubwa hadi masomo magumu.
Wakati wetu kwamba wasichana si wa kusoma, ni wa kuolewa, ng'ombe ipatikane, wazazi wakuwe watajiri.
Tunashughulikia yote.
I wish I were a better investor.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Indemule. We continue looking at the big headlines, not just in Kenya, but across the region. Of course, the regional crisis brewing in the DRC. That has been our discussion since we began this morning. But Sosioni wanted to add something. I'll give you an opportunity before we move to the next discussion.
Yes, I don't think it is right to use small misunderstandings to postpone the efforts to silence the guns in DRC Congo. It is urgent to silence the gun. That is the most important thing. And I am sure President Tshisekedi would like peace. And any efforts towards peace, he must cooperate as a president. Because, of course, when you talk of East African community, it's a fast-growing regional integration, and when you talk about reforming the African continent, we can't do it when there are pockets of fights. I think it is urgent to bring peace in DRC and East Congo. And if there are reservation that Tshisekedi has, it must be flagged out and they must be addressed through the diplomatic channels. And I believe the heads of state meeting that was convened yesterday, and even any other that will be convened, is important for all parties to cooperate. We are not going to transform Africa, and I talked about it. And we've seen Africa is the richest continent in terms of resources, but we have been divided so that we can't unite, exploit our resources, and advance our development. And that is what is contained in Africa 2063, promoting inter-African trade, opening the borders, allowing free movement of people and free movement of goods. The guns must be silenced everywhere. That one, there is no option. And there must be democratic order within all the countries. And we can't afford to lose life because of external interest. Some of these guns is because of external interest in terms of control of resources. And it has come a time the resources of Africa must be controlled in Africa, and even the raw materials should not be exported out of Africa. It must be value added, and we have a strong African economy that can match with the other continents.
Very well.
We cannot do that if we are not managing small issues like silencing the guns in DR Congo. It is in the interest not only of East African community, but that of Africa. Right. And even the mission of Kenya. And I want you to understand this, Fred Idimuli. When you see the President of the Republic of Kenya negotiating with all other presidents and presenting the candidature over Kenya with credible credentials, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, that is no mean move. It is a serious move. And as Kenya, we would like to contribute to the advancement of Africa and the achievements of the intended goals of 2063, even far much earlier. And so it's a big mission for Kenya. And don't think when the president is posing that big strategic objective, it is something that will be admired by the losers of the unity of Africa.
Point made.
They are losers of the unity of Africa. And the losers of the unity of Africa will never be happy. That one we should have it within our hindsight.
I want us to move to a different discussion. Of course, yes, indeed, it is a huge crisis. What's happening in DRC threatens to turn into a serious humanitarian crisis, with thousands of families being forced to flee Goma due to the fighting that's currently ongoing. In Kenya, this crisis has taken a different tangent, and questions being asked about Kenya's diplomacy and diplomatic efforts. Let's come back home and take a look at something totally different, and this has to do with the reconstitution of the IEBC and the work that awaits the Commission. Last week, we saw the swearing in of members to the IEBC selection panel, who have a job to, within 90 days, reconstitute the IEBC. But there are concerns that are already being raised. One of them is on whether or not we'll still have time to delimit and review boundaries before the next elections. It is part of the stories that we've covered here at TV47 as well. The jitters surrounding the IEBC reconstitution. Let's watch that story.
You can imagine the deprivation.
National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula and the National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah have expressed fears that the boundaries delimitation process may be the biggest casualty of the delayed reconstitution of IEBC, the two emphasizing that the delay has hindered the timely conducting of by-elections in various constituencies, and words the two claim it may be impossible to create additional constituencies before the 2027 polls.
As they recruit the commissioners for IEBC, we do hope that the new commission will work fast to ensure that all the by-elections that have been pending are carried on and we have a full house.
Wetangula argues that a possible demographic-based adjustments could allow the IEBC to redraw boundaries by redistributing populations within existing constituencies, as he urged members of parliament to support the IEBC in carrying out this task once the new commissioners are in office.
Would there be for Nairobi?
However, the Jubilee Party has poked holes on the new selection panel. The former ruling party says majority are pro-government. The party is now demanding a total overhaul of the IEBC Secretariat chaired by Hussein Marjan.
The old team is already working on issues of IEBC from State House. And they have started procuring even before commissioners get into office. Kwa wale ambao pengine wamesahau, tulikuwa tunataka commissioners wa IEBC na commissioners wakipatikana, we wanted an overhaul of the secretariat. We want the whole secretariat overhauled because the rigging that took place 2022 was not done by the commissioners themselves.
President William Ruto appointed Kio Melinda Gaki, Olo Adams, James Evans Misati, Nicodemus Kipchirchir Bore, Ambassador Kokimuli, Grigon Caroline Kituku, Tanui Andrew Kipkoech, Nelson Makanda, and Fatuma Samana to be members of the panel. In the notice, President William Ruto also revoked the earlier notice of selection panel that was gazetted in the year 2023. The 9 were sworn into the office at the Supreme Court building on Monday this week. Elizabeth Mutuko, TV47, Nairobi.
Yes, indeed, that's a discussion we now want to get into. The work that awaits the IEBC once it is reconstituted, barring the hurdles that could hinder that process. But once reconstituted, there are 4 major things that the IEBC is supposed to do. 1, continuous registration of voters. 2, the by-elections that have been pending. 3, preparation for the general election. And 4th, review and delimitation of boundaries, which is a very thorny issue. And because now we are heading to 2027, numbers are key, and each politician will be counting the numbers with a calculator. Now, the issue is failure to delimit the boundaries and review the boundaries before a certain date means that it will not happen before the next elections. It is exactly 30 months to August 2027. The IEBC will be reconstituted in the next 3 months. So remove the 3, 27. You cannot conduct a delimitation of boundaries 12 months before the next election, meaning that you remove the 12 months, then the IEBC will only have 15 months to do that. Given the fact that there are so many other things it's supposed to do you agree with the Speaker of the National Assembly that probably, yes, we should do away, we should not really bother with the delimitation of boundaries this time round?
Yeah, and I think in a big way, that explains why there has been a lot of delays in actually even just approving the panel as we saw. There were contentious issues, and both sides of the political divide did not agree, and especially on these issues of Ms. Kokimuli. You remember it was, and at times I don't understand some leaders in this country, like the Honorable Jeremiah Kioni. I've just listened to him say that he's not sure the people in that team are pro-government. I don't understand him, because I know the last time I listened to him, he told us, because I'm a member of Jubilee, that the only issue they were waiting for is for the issue of Ms. Kokimuli to be included or to be removed, and so that he can be replaced by the other gentleman. So really, we cannot afford to, I know the opposition will always want to set stage for those kind of conversations so that they can start hitting on the government as early as now, as they have always done. But I don't think it is fair. Let's focus on the most important things, just like we are raising the issue of delimitation. We have the time. Is it going to happen? We know that clearly. We have quite a number of constituencies and wards that have not been able to conduct by-elections for the last almost more than 1 year. So it is important that we focus on it. But from where I sit, and I know I come from the Mount Kenya region, and this has been a clarion call. It's something that we've always insisted on, because some of our constituencies are really huge, and the population is huge as well, and that affects service delivery to the people. So when our leaders and when we seek delimitation, and it is because we would like to improve on service delivery. It is because that would also affect, how resources are distributed to our people. So I think we need, what I see from where I sit, I don't think we have enough time. And maybe we should just prepare to go into the next general election as we are with the 290 constituencies. And maybe in future, we shall plan better and ensure that this is...
Yet this is a provision, an express provision that we made in our constitution. We even did the projection of how many years you have to do this. Are we too ambitious in including that provision, Article 89 of the Constitution?
No, I think, Fred, what we need to do is that we need to utilize the technical staff at the IEBC, because I don't think that it's very, fair to claim that, the lack of commissioners mean that the IEBC should not be. I think we need to actually change some of these things to ensure that the commissioners can just come and work in a very short time to do some of these things which are going to take very long, because I don't think that the commissioners are the actual experts at the IEBC. The technical staff are there, the secretariat staff are there. What are they doing? What are they doing? You mean that the IEBC is now incapacitated just because we don't have 4 or 5 people? I think it's very unfair to the country. The resources we put in place, we are paying salaries for our permanent staff there. The lack, and you see some of the wards and constituencies lacking MPs for a very long time. We need to find modalities to contain some of these things. Personally, I proposed even to the committee, which was chaired co-chaired by Chungwa and Kalonzo, that when you do a by-election, we need to change the laws to ensure that when you do a by-election, that constituency or ward or if it's a senate or governor should not go for, should take a 5-year period. Should take a 5-year period and should not be subjected to another election in the general election if the general election is going to be earlier, so that we don't waste a lot of resources. Somebody like now, if the IEBC comes in, you're going to do a by-election, then 1 year later you do a general election for the same constituency. The resource-wise, I don't think is very fair to the country, in a country where we are struggling to provide basics.
But in terms of priorities, do you think that probably on that list, by-elections should be first? Forget about delimitation for now.
I think by-elections, because people don't have representation. We need to have by-elections so that every Kenyan, and I think some of these Kenyans, if they went to court today, will be found at fault that they have not had representations. So as Kenyans, and the delimitation, like me, if you ask me the delimitation in a place like Dagoretti North, you just need to redraw some of the borders, like Kilimani and Kileleshwa. Just move the borders and you'll solve some of these problems. You'll find a ward which has almost half of the population you have in another ward before you redraw the ones for the constituencies in Nairobi. A place like Nairobi and central Kenya, the challenge is the population density. And you realize that when you are doing the Nairobi River Commission activities, some of the borders, some of the wards were almost wiped out. A ward like Hospital Ward in Mathare was almost 3/4 of it went because people were staying along the river. And when the population were moved with the clearance of the riparian land, almost 3/4 of the ward disappeared because it's a very densely populated area. So some of them moved to Mlango Kubwa, some of them moved to Mabatini, some of them moved to Ngei. So we need to find a way of ensuring that these are handled.
Listening to the Speaker of the National Assembly and even the Majority Leader seems to suggest that the IEBC should focus on the by-elections first, and then preparations for the elections, including the voter registration. It would appear that we have set ourselves in a place where we feel that delimitation of boundaries before the next election is a very inconvenient undertaking for us. Should we do away with it for now?
Well, I think, Fred, loosely I will agree, because there is really lack of time to do some of those things. Because don't forget that there will be disputes again. Once the delimitation has been done, there will be people rushing, to try to dispute that the way it has been done is not correct. And then it will drag IEBC into looking at one such issue, and you know that our elections are such that they are just atomic, especially presidential. So if you distract the IEBC into actually going to deal with the issue of boundaries, it's sort of...
But why do you call it a distraction? Why has it become so inconvenient for us to...
No, I wanted to come to...
limitation of boundaries.
I wanted to come to that, Fred. This is all about politics as well. Like my colleague has said, you see, when things don't go the way politicians want, they quickly find excuse to cite the law or try to trigger, try to imagine what the other politician is thinking, so that they now end up saying this process is not correct. For example, now, why were we waiting until this week to swear in the selection panel? Yes, of course there were court cases and all that. Why were there court cases? So you realize that this is really about politics, and it's high time leaders actually took seriously political leadership and governance, so that you don't put the country in such a mess. Now we are discussing, should we deal with boundaries? It is constitutional, it's a mandate of the IEBC, but we are also looking at practicality, timelines. So I think that it's high time really politicians and leaders in the country become honest and say, kusema kweli hapa Kioni, or kusema kweli hapa Kalonzo, or kusema kweli hapa Alai, this is not correct. And then we should have that basic agreement. We should have a threshold that, I mean, if we argue like this, we are taking the country downwards.
My concern is, because this is an express provision of the Constitution, it's not an act of Parliament. It's the Constitution that prescribes when delimitation of boundaries should be done. We are already in defiance of that. The risk is, because there has been no consequence, we defy the Constitution without consequence. Are we staring at a possibility that we could even seek to adjust the election dates, if at all we feel it's inconvenient?
The election date is
without
also,
any consequence.
The election date is also protected by the Constitution.
Just like the delimitation of boundaries.
It is every August of the 5th year, and the first week for that matter. And so that one is not negotiable. That will be a dangerous space to take the country to try and negotiate change of date.
Are we saying some sections of the Constitution are negotiable, others are not?
And you might be inviting a similar crisis like the Congo. You don't do that. Fred, let us be clear. IEBC is a creature of the Constitution, Chapter 15. Independent institutions that are properly funded by the Exchequer to execute its mandate. The only thing that we were lacking is having the chair and commissioners. Now that the way has been cleared, and this one I indict the judiciary. We must call for efficiency in the judiciary for matters that are very sensitive to the state, that they must be disposed. There is no reason why they cannot be disposed when Kenyans file cases. They can be fast-tracked, and this is one item that was obstructed by the judicial, I will call it judicial laziness. We don't need judicial laziness in the current constitutional dispensation where rights are urgent. The functions of IEBC, all of them, they do not happen in series. That one item can be conducted and all others are frozen. Now, all of them can operate in parallel, and that is the only way to do it. And delimitation of boundaries cannot be postponed simply because we are outside the timeline of the Constitution. It is urgent that it is done, and it should be done. We still have enough time up to 2027. It can be fast-tracked. Fred, I believe once the chair and commissioners are in office, they will be able to trigger and commence the process of audit of 2022 election. That one is a must. They should be able to trigger also all the by-elections in the few areas that needs to be done in Kenya. And when you're conducting by-election, it doesn't mean you stop the audit process. The audit process should go on to its logical conclusion. And IEBC has got technical personnel and infrastructure who can do all these things. The work of delimitation should also go on. That should not be affected. The work of registration of voters should also be commenced.
The Speaker of the National Assembly suggests that probably they should not focus on delimitation.
No. You can't stop IEBC from exercising its mandate. If the chair and commissioners sit and decide that all these programs can go on at the same time, effectively because they have the right infrastructure, the personnel, so it will. And we cannot sit outside here, those of us who are not members of IEBC, and begin prescribing to the IEBC how it should work. IEBC has a law to guide it. IEBC has a constitution, and IEBC, they know their expectation. And for us, we expect IEBC, once the chair and commissioners are in place, we expect IEBC to come back to order and to prepare the country for 2027. And in fact, I dare say, even a matter of registration of voters, Alai has alluded to some voters who were relocated out of the riparian land, and that then they could have been moved to other jurisdictions. Voter registration and transfer of votes should be a continuous thing. We are in the verge of the 4th industrial revolution, where we are doing e-government, and we are doing things through ICT, and Kenyans are techno-savvy. It is possible to have a continuous voter registration that goes on even to the voting day. This business of not trusting our system, that we must stop registration of voters at a certain point, it's not a civilized way of democracy. If you look at the American system, voters register even to the last day. If we have a foolproof working ICT infrastructure that can facilitate, even a student who has attained the age of 18 in the month of June or July 2027 should have a right to register as a voter and vote. Well, so those are things. We must allow IEBC to perform its role, but we don't need to stop it from outside.
Boundaries,
the roles are known. They can all be done.
Preparation for general election, by-elections that are pending, and continuous registration of voters. Those are the 4 functions that await the IEBC. Will they be able to conduct all 4 before the next elections? Speaking of numbers, because we're just talking about numbers in preparation for 2027, there's a very huge headline on the front page of the Daily Nation talking about scandal of doctored census. So, for the past 5 years, Kenya has been making financial and policy decisions for 3 counties, namely Garissa, Mandera, and Wajir, based on false data. The High Court has now cancelled the 2019 Kenya National Bureau of Statistics census results for the 3 northeastern counties, citing significant irregularities, and ordered a recount within a year, well ahead of the 2027 polls, meaning that these numbers, if they change, they will definitely affect the 2027 polls. Everyone else, every other region will be considered depending on the numbers as stated in the KNBS 2019 census, but not those 3 counties. What are we looking at? There are people who are very happy with this order, Kathy. There are those who see a risk that these numbers, if they change significantly, it could mean that this region now has significant numbers that could counter any other region, because that's how Kenyan politics is played.
Yeah, that is true. So the first question that we need to ask ourselves is, how did we get there? You know, I mean, we have used that data even for planning purposes, you know, and that is for the last couple of years. I think it is only fair that they are given that opportunity for a recount, and so that we verify the data and get the correct data if that is the case. But then we are talking about three areas which are also having problems when it comes to the border, to the porous, the nature of our porous borders, and therefore there could be other people maybe who made their way into the country. I think this, for me, is actually a security issue, and it is something that needs to be looked into, because how you know, they are claiming, or the people of the northeastern region are telling us that the data, and we can see it here, the numbers that we are using to allocate resources and even to give them services are actually lower than the actual population. So we really need to know, because there have been claims in the past, and even in other regimes. I mean, since the 2006, and I think thereabout, there has been claims of people who who came through those borders and got IDs, people who migrated from Somalia and they got into Kenya. So this story, are we looking at another such case? I don't know. I don't know what we are dealing with.
The nation
here.
calls it a scandal.
So I think we really need to, our security agencies also need to look into this issue. I think it's also a political issue and a huge one, because if the numbers tilt again, you know the result of that is that if the region will vote in a certain way, then it means an advantage to whichever candidate that they'll be supporting. But I think, in all fairness, let's do a recount.
Okay. Wanalai, on this one.
I think that we don't really take KNBS and we don't take census data very seriously. And you realize that you live in an age, like the SG was saying, the information age. And the goal here is the data. The data we have about our population, you know, the various dynamics in our population, the demographics, and so on. We don't take it seriously. And I think that the institution which has led the country down is KNBS. And because some of us, like personally, have been a very great consumer of the data there. And sometimes you find a great disconnect from the reality and the data which was collected. And I think that sometimes the data is politically motivated. It is not from actual reality. Because I think that they need to give the reality on the ground, that they not to play to the whims of the politicians who are in the seat of power. And so the supervising authority for the KNBS might have been influencing the data in a very wrong, way. I just wish that KNBS would take the data they collect seriously, because it determines a lot of things, the resource allocation, representation, and so on. And if they don't give accurate and correct data, you'll find a lot of questions. You know, even some of us have been asking a lot of questions even about the population data which is being given. Even the Ruiru constituency census data. If you travel around this country, you'll question a lot of information which is displayed as the census data in this country.
Are you suggesting that the problems could be more than just this county?
If you find 3 countries, because these are the people who went to court. It is not everybody went to court. If the court was able to find anomalies in this data from these 3 constituencies, I think that they need to review proper. What needs to happen is that we need to automate. We need to ensure that by the time you're born, by the time you're born or there's a conception, we need to understand that there's a human being. We need to count our people regularly, so that the census data, which is collected after 10 years, I think should just be able to confirm what we already know. It should not be like it is going to be the one which is going to surprise us and tell us something which you already know. I think that counting or knowing the dynamics of your population should be a continuous process. It should not be done once in a while. I think we need to reform KNBS. We need to properly automate it. We need to ensure that the data collection, and you see, because the data is very important. Almost 2 years to the election, you will start seeing a lot of poll results being released by the pollsters every now and then, and that data, whip emotions depending on the political side you are in, and it's very unfortunate that if we were able to consume data, even for politicians, if you're going to vie, the moment you don't use data, you use a lot of resources. Okay. But if you consume data, you are able to know that this area, like in Kileleshwa, I have 2 days, they have a place which is a slum and a place which is not a slum. If you go to the slum area, priority number 1 might be bursaries. But if you go to a middle class area, that bursaries might be number 8 or number 10 in the. So
data is important, yes, but the question here is the integrity of this data and how it is used, the politicization of the same. Is that what we are looking at? And could this repeat in the 3 counties, ignite another debate on whether the data across the country is actually accurate?
Yes, Fred, we have a big problem with the border counties. Border counties, not only in northeastern and the northern area, but also, for example, Busia. We border Uganda from that side. And when I have had cases where people come to my office to say, I want an ID, but I cannot be given an ID because I come from Busia and I'm in Nairobi, my mother is here, I schooled right here, and they are saying I have to go to the border town where my original home is so that I get, chief's letter from there and all that kind of thing. Yet, If you are born in Kiambu, you'll just walk to the register of persons and actually get an ID without that much hassle. So there's also a problem in the northern counties because these are people with vast relationships in Ethiopia, the Oromo, in Somalia. You know, they are relatives, just relatives, like they were born maybe in Kenya, they went to live in Somalia. Or they have been living in Somalia when they were younger, now they come back to Kenya. You see this kind of cases in court every time. So what can the NBS do? You see, NBS takes out a form and gives you to feel the way it is. But it has been found out that the return of relatives can actually totally complicate. Now, for example, they are saying there is a huge number of people probably who are left out. It is possible that some of the people were actually intentionally left out because probably they did not have certain basic documents or information to give to the NBS. Or some of these people were actually outside and they're coming in. And like somebody said, it can also be political, so that the numbers are ballooned to appear like Somalia now is huge than Kisii. So this is there really. I mean, talking of, you know, just on a light note, there is this talk. What does that mean for the 2027 elections? It means a lot. It means a lot because who is more predominant in that area, who might be voted by such expansionist approach. So I don't think people can sit at NBS and say we will not count these people. But there are complications in border counties, especially in the northern counties where the person in Mandera literally can have citizenship here in Kenya and also have citizenship in Somalia. So, and I think the country is careful. It is not only Kenya, by the way. You've seen America is complaining. Gulf of Mexico, there are migrants coming just through from Brazil and Mexico and all that. So I think this border thing, you know, it borders on integrity and sovereignty of a nation. And it is important, even though this order is made, I think there will be somebody from the AG to appeal against the order to allow for the ministry to understand first, for the government to understand who exactly was left out. And by the way, through the security apparatus, the government already knows whether it is true some people were left out or this is purely, you know, maybe a political...
If the numbers after the repeat of the census in the 3 counties show a significant increase in the population of those 3 counties, that will be a new debate in terms of politics of 2027. Don't you agree?
It cannot be a new debate. Rights of people, constitutional rights are constitutional rights. You can't take them away. You can't debate about those rights. And we are dealing with a matter that has been adjudicated by a competent court. And it has returned a verdict and a directive to do census afresh. So it's important that is done. What is the purpose of census? Census is not to guide elections and to give projection on the voting power. The voting right is of every individual, regardless of number, that voting right is codified and it remains. And that is a matter for IEBC. But the purposes of the census is for planning and for allocation of resources, period. And therefore what it means, if the numbers vary significantly upwards, and that it is proved that in 2019, the numbers were different, then what it requires is compensation for the resources that may have been lost over the years. And it requires recalibration of allocation of resources to those particular regions. And therefore, I think this is a wake-up call for Kenya National Bureau of Statistics as it prepares for the national census of 2029, that we should not have these errors, we should not have these mistakes. It must reform itself, and it must have a more effective infrastructure of collecting data with respect to the census data. I think we might be using outdated tools that are not capturing everyone. We need to, KNBS needs to improve its tools of collecting data so that then we don't have a repeat and people complaining. So that then we have a proper census that gives us the actual numbers, particularly in the pastoral regions where population move. There could also be trans-border movement of people from Kenya to Somalia and back, and it's a right to move. But then we must capture them as they move. So I think it's a lesson. And there must be a remedy to compensate those regions in terms of review of budget allocation and review of resources going into the future. That
and
that
when it comes to resource allocation, because that has always been the argument, and even when it comes to review of boundaries, there's a connection there. Back to the same debate of 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote. Now we'll have counties in the northeastern region who have always been said to be fewer in number, now claiming that no, our numbers are actually much higher. So the debate you had that some counties like Ruiru or constituencies like Ruiru had more numbers, that will have to change.
Exactly, and I honestly believe that this is also going to elicit some debate moving forward, because you remember when the issue of one man, 1 shilling, 1 vote was brought forward by the likes of Kioni and the rest of them, the people who actually came out strongly to oppose were the people from the northeastern region. Now that we are talking about their numbers, and the argument would be that they are also the area is vast geographically, and the population is not what had been reflected before in the census of 2019, and maybe even before that is their claim. So I'm sure now there's going to be a contest between not just two communities. That is not what I meant, but then that debate will continue and continue. But it is important that where people are more, where people are, like there's an increase, especially in the case that we're discussing right here, that we also allocate resources equivalent or that match with the numbers, so that in such a scenario and in such a case, then we are able to offer services to the people. And the proponents of the one man, 1 shilling, 1 vote have always reminded us, and it is actually the case. Where I come from, the CDF or any allocations for bursaries, the needy students from those regions get as little as 1,000 shillings. So you can imagine 1,000 bob for 1 kid, and you're supposed to take this child to school. So the allocation or the bursary that they get will do, literally nothing, because that is just like transport that you're giving the child. And there are other areas where the population is lower, yet they are getting the same amount of money, or even at times slightly higher. They are able to take their children even to university and stuff like that. But then there are some people who have talked about the equalization. But then let's look at it this way. Where there's a huge population, a huge number of people who are working, they are also taxpayers, and therefore they contribute a huge number, when it comes to the resources. A good chunk of the national resources is contributed from those regions. Okay. So it is good to be fair and allocate the resources according to the number of people at the grassroots. Okay, Bonala, do you think that probably the politics of numbers and how this, because it's purely about resource allocation, that this is what we should focus on right now as we head towards 2027, the fact that some people have been claiming there are more in their constituencies, that debate for 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote, that now at least these 3 counties could reignite that debate and say, hey, even as our numbers are a bit different.
I think we need to discard the notion of the numbers, because people use it and politicians love to use it. Then the numbers that, we have more people, one community against the other. It is going to be very wrong for the country to, because you remember we used it during the BBI campaigns all through, and some of us were arguing against the 1 shilling, 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote. Some were saying 1 kilometer, 1 shilling, 1 vote. So, because some constituencies are bigger than a whole region. So I think that it's only fair that we try to ensure that this doesn't become an issue. It is not used by the politicians as a campaign, tool, saying that we need more resources because we are so many. But do you think it's already an issue? Because even this 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote debate was there for a whole year. It just died down the other day. Isn't it already an issue? I think it's an issue, but the professional body which should be squaring that is not up to the task. Because I think that the tools we are using to collect the data are old, because I think we have a lot of malls, schools, roads, and so on. We need to use cameras. We need to use, when you walk in places in great cities like in Japan, in Tokyo, the footprints, the foot traffic is counted every day, every minute. There's no way you're going to go without the government knowing that how many people have passed through this road today, how many vehicles have driven through it, and some of this, the data, if you see how the KNBS is still collecting data, it's still very manual. You find interns by the sides of the road wearing reflector jackets, counting. Sometimes they're looking away. So I don't know how they count. I don't know if they count each one of them. I think we need to deploy better tools. And until then, let numbers not be used as a, I think we need to have a vision of where we want to take this country in regards to automation.
Yet we cannot afford to ignore the numbers, Wakili. As we move to another discussion, we cannot afford.
You just keep wondering then whether KNBS is properly capacitated, whether they are really given the resources they need. You see, we may just talk about them, but probably do they have that budget to actually do the right thing? Why are they sending people manually, like Ali says? Then they need to use better technologies to ensure they have captured who is where. So, but I think these north counties might actually throw a spanner in the works for every other county. I'm very sure that every county wants to say, no, even our numbers were not correct, and therefore, some figures might just be thrown out there to balance the numbers so that the resources can be sent to these counties well above the normal ones that we are receiving now. This is likely actually to throw a spanner in the works.
It's indeed a big discussion, and on the front page of the Daily Nation, they call it a scandal. Scandal of doctored census data. The story is on page 7 of the Daily Nation. As we come to the end of our discussion this morning, I want us to just take a look at one very political headline. Wakwaruzana tena kwenye kurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Anasema naibu rais Profesa Kithure Kindiki amemsuta mtangulizi wake Rigathi Gachagua kuwa kauli yake kwamba Rais William Ruto atakuwa rais wa mhula mmoja ni ndoto na haitakuwa jambo rahisi kutimiza. It's also there on the front page of the Daily Nation. It is also the subject of one of our reports here at TV47 on the back and forth between the current deputy president and his predecessor. Let's watch that story.
President William Ruto's allies from the Mount Kenya region, led by Deputy President Professor Kithure Kindiki, trained their guns on former DP Rigathi Gachagua, with DP Kindiki laughing off threats by his predecessor to make Ruto a one-term president.
We shall make whatever sacrifices necessary to make sure that William Ruto is a one-term president.
Usitutishe ati rais a one-term president. And pia watu wengine wanatutisha huko jana. Ati our job is to make sure William Ruto is a one-term president. That is your objective. Hiyo tu. Just that. And you will have achieved a lot. President Ruto is lucky to be among the 5 Kenyans who have occupied the seat of President of Kenya.
Kindiki, who hosted a delegation of leaders from his Tharaka Nithi County backyard at his official residence in Karen, threw jabs at his predecessor, with leaders in the delegation questioning Gachagua's track record.
We are ready for you. Na tutawajibu sana sahi, tutakutana huko mbele. Because all these characters, hakuna mtu hajakuwa kiongozi. Si Kalonzo Musyoka alikuwa vice president. Si ni kama mimi. Yeye alikuwa 5 years under Kibaki. So akifika pale Tharaka Nithi, the people will ask him, when you were vice president, can you give us one project hapa ile ulitusukumia?
I challenge any Kenyan. Give me a speech of 2 minutes of Rigathi Gachagua speaking about the development agenda and government policies about the Mount Kenya region people. Na mimi nitauliza, mumemuona hata siku moja kwa project ya maendeleo Tharaka Nithi?
Kindiki is expected to tour Nyeri and Embu counties soon in what is likely to set the stage for a Herculean task of winning back the Mount Kenya region that has seemingly shifted loyalty to Gachagua and counter Gachagua's anti-government narrative, exposing the government's failings.
William Ruto's objective is not to serve for 2 terms. It is to use the time that God will give him in office to bring transformative programs in 1, 2, 3 areas and then leave.
During the opening of DAP Kenya offices in Nairobi, Gachagua shocked the nation by alleging State House is the epicenter of corruption, while exposing the affordable housing program as a corrupt venture meant to benefit a Finn government, a statement that did not sit well with Land CS Alice Wahome, who wants Gachagua to produce evidence to back up his sensational claims.
For somebody at the level of my deputy president, former deputy president, to tell Kenyans that there is somewhere my ministry is sitting behind the scenes and making some illegal contracts, I would want him to tell the EACC where is that.
Apul Kamau, TV47.
Gachagua was impeached in October last year, and immediately after that, most government-allied politicians dismissed him as totally inconsequential. Yet for the last 2 weeks, we see the president going to Western Kenya and spending most of his time responding to Rigathi Gachagua. Now we're seeing the deputy president and other high-ranking leaders going to central Kenya and responding to the same Rigathi Gachagua. Is it still inconsequential, as you had earlier claimed, Bwana Sosion?
No, extremely inconsequential. Because one, Rigathi Gachagua was impeached on 11 grounds of being unsuitable to hold public office as an individual as Rigathi Gachagua. And so
why are you spending so much time responding to it?
His attempts of trying to whip the mountain will come to naught in the fullness of time. And I would say this, Kenya is a country of free speech. That's a fact for sure. And people can exercise the provision in Article 38 to speak what they speak. And we have seen the deputy president, and I want to state, because there's a lot of speculation about the shifting political mood of the mountain region as a big happening and drama. And far from it, I would like to state as such. The mountain is still right in the heart and the center of the president. The deputy president of the Republic of Kenya is the son of the mountain, Professor Kithure Kindiki. And those who are still trying to coalesce and gravitate around Rigathi Gachagua to try and think that they are going to pull some surprise, they should know Rigathi Gachagua is a spent cartridge in the political scene.
Just
and
how spent a cartridge
they should
when
shift,
the president and his deputy cannot
now
talk
they
about
should
else,
shift,
but
and now they should shift. Allow me, Fred, to finish. Now they should shift their focus to Professor Kithure Kindiki and read every word and the lips of Professor Kithure Kindiki. And so trying to think that you are going to shake the mountain, the mountain may be uneasy for now.
The panelists to only about 7 minutes or so. Kathy,
yes.
Spent cartridge when the president cannot speak about anything else apart from Rigathi Gachagua. Now we are seeing he sent his deputy to do the same. If at all he was that important or he was inconsequential politically, why waste all the time?
The former deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, spent a lot of time, during and after his impeachment, whipping the emotions of the people of Mount Kenya region. Unfortunately, that's the only region where he is crisscrossing even today. Although I saw a small group of people from some other regions, claiming to be from other regions, visit him at Wamonyoro. It is that whipping of emotions that actually culminated into the force support that he pretends to have. Because to me, I know the people of Mount Kenya region, and I am from Mount Kenya region, I am from Madeira specifically, when the time is right, they know what to do. And it is very unfortunate. It is very unfortunate that the former deputy president has spent a lot of time actually telling lies. To me, those are lies, because at some point, I was looking at some clips yesterday of comments that he made when he was in power. And today he wants to say the exact opposite. Like, for example, during the finance bill, he supported the finance bill. His members of parliament who are following him today supported the finance bill. He actually went out and told the people of Mount Kenya region one day in Nyandarua that if your members of parliament do not support the finance bill, then where are you going to get money to do development from? So he has been saying this around this. He has been bashing the president and saying all the things that he's saying now just because he's out of power. But then he knows the way to manipulate the voters, and that is exactly what he's doing currently. So he's speaking to Wanjiku, and with the hope that Wanjiku will follow him towards 2027.
Because Bonasocion said he's a spent cartridge. You seem to admit that he has managed to move the voters in a certain
I believe, yes, he has managed
whether
to
through manipulation or
yes, through whipping of emotions. But that will change. The people of Mount Kenya...
But I pose it to you that the president and his deputy cannot afford to ignore Rigathi Gachagua. No, I think, however much you dismiss it on this.
No, I think Rigathi Gachagua is overrated. I think because checking on whatever he has said before is not very reliable. And you know the silent voters who make a lot of decisions and clear decisions, the Wamamas and the mature Wazees, they don't speak much in rallies, you don't see them in motorbikes around, but they make clear decisions on where the vote should be. When Rigathi Gachagua was talking about shareholding and so on, he was not able to enforce it. Instead, I was like he said, nitaweka mtego kila pahali na when he said that yeye ni chuma ya zamani, hakuna mtu za kumtoa in the seat of the deputy presidency, he moved. And if Raila was the deputy president, or you even had, let's say, even Ichungwa was the deputy president, Nairobi would have been at a standstill if any attempt was made to remove him. Rigathi Gachagua was removed without even one hawker flinching, without even one street saying that, why are you removing him? He was removed like he was so inconsequential. So now he has become a broker for politicians, the lazy politicians, who are now saying, kila mtu is going to Wamunyoro, like Wamunyoro is a mugumo tree, where they are going to pledge loyalty and pray facing, that if they don't pray facing Wamunyoro, they're not going to be elected. I think politicians who are not going to use resources and use data and going to use their own, clear channels, now depend on Rigathi Gachagua to make a serious impact. And finally, Kenya, the politics of Kenya is factored around cult of personalities. Previously, it was those who hate Raila or love Raila. And Raila was a very great determining factor. Now, what Rigathi Gachagua is trying to create is either those people who love him and hopes that the people who love him should hate Ruto.
All right.
And the people who hate Ruto should love him. That's what he's trying. So he's trying to bring him some cult of personality around him to use to broker, get resources.
Can he be ignored? Can the president and his deputy afford to ignore Rigathi?
No, I think that's what my co-panelists are not coming out. Really, I don't think you can ignore Rigathi Gachagua in terms of the fact that he has been in the bedroom and he's coming out and saying, you know what, our bedroom looks like this. And for political expediency, of course, and for the strategic way of managing him, everybody thinks differently. And of course, those who are pro, what the president has done or Kenya Kwanza has done, they would argue in a certain way, especially looking at the strategic partnerships in the future. But I agree entirely that he's a loose talker. And I agree with my co-panelist when she says that for 2 hours, the guy spent like 1 hour, 45 minutes talking about William Ruto. Of course, the president also talked about him when he was in Western. So this deep simmering bitterness that continues to go on cannot be ignored. And today, nobody, absolutely nobody, except Rigathi Gachagua, actually, who gives William Ruto concern, either for how he's running his affairs or for the 2027. So for me, he's a guy to watch, but he has a big burden behind him. The burden is impeachment. Now, will the courts clear him to run and yet there is impeachment? Will they set aside this impeachment to the extent that it was probably irregular and therefore you can run for president? So, I think that is part of the reason why I see a lot of movement in the judiciary, judiciary with the security of the CJ and all that. So these are all interconnected things and we must read them correctly as Kenyans. Rigathi Gachagua is still a force in terms of mobilizing. If this guy can take only 2 million or 1 million votes from Mount Kenya, still that is a concern because winning is not about how many votes did you get. If you won votes by 200,000 votes, are you going to increase that margin in your favor or against you? So yes, he cannot be ignored, and the kind of statements he's making, saying he's a truthful man, you know, I have not gone to State House offices, but he has gone there and he's coming out saying, I'm sorry, there's a cent here and there's another cent over there. So apart from, yeah, he also is a political mobilizer and he knows what he's saying, that is not true. I can tell you Kenyans will identify more with him now, because that's what Kenyans also like. Kenyans do not bother the real technical truth and facts. And Rigathi seems to have actually understood that and captured that very correctly. Yes.
4 months after his impeachment, Rigathi Gachagua still finds himself on the front pages of our dailies. On the front page of Taifa Leo, habari kuu pale wanasema wakwaruzana tena, ukiweka picha aliyekuwa naibu wa rais Rigathi Gachagua na ambaye ni naibu wa rais sasa Professor Kithure Kindiki. Thank you so much, Ishmael Nyaribo, advocate of the High Court. Wilson Sosion was served as SG of the Great National Union of Teachers, KNUT, and also as a former member of the National Assembly. Robert Alai, MC Kileleshwa, and Kathy Rongo, political commentator, for your time and your opinions on TV47. Well, thanks to you two, our viewers, for keeping us, for remaining glued to the screens. There's a lot more coming after the break on this show. Let me just tell you what's the discussion. Urinary tract infection. This is a discussion that my colleague Ann Odida will be having with gynecologist Ignatius Kibe. You don't want to miss that. Plus, Fitness Thursday coming after that. My name is Fred Ndimuli. Good morning.